Next, I would like to introduce our final speaker, the chair of the Umbrellas for Faith Committee, Mr. Amr Zahir.
Salam, shalom, and peace be to you. I am far from the chairman of anything. Actually, I appreciate the introduction, but actually the guys behind here deserve the credit, as well as the other parents who were involved. So I'm going to work up to giving individual thanks to all the gentlemen up here. But first of all, I want to share a very short, small story with you. And it's actually about Hinsdale Central, so hopefully you guys will appreciate this. So about 30 years ago, there was a freshman student who was at Hinsdale Central who was actually actively at the time trying to hide his ethnicity and his faith. This was actually in the aftermath of the Iranian hostage crisis, which I'm sure some of you older folks will remember here in the room, old like me. And that student at the time wanted nothing more than to fit in with all of his classmates. At the time, he felt that the best way to do that was to actually hide his ethnicity, his background, and avoiding any discussion about beliefs. Ultimately, that high school student, later in high school as well as in college, slowly learned that this was not the right way to go, and he learned to accept his uniqueness and began to realize that that uniqueness was in fact an asset and not a liability, and that he had nothing to fear. Furthermore, over time, he began to realize that other students, other contemporaries, we're actually learning to respect that uniqueness, and ultimately that uniqueness and difference and individuality was a source of interest to others and a source of respect and commonality. So this is more than just a story. This is actually a personal story, and that student, if you haven't guessed it, was me. I went to Hinsdale Central a long time ago, long before my future contemporaries behind me. But I tell you this story not to share anything personal per se, but to actually try and illustrate the courage and the leadership that these young men behind me are exhibiting, and hopefully will continue to exhibit. As Perry was mentioning before, there's a lot of courage that's required to take part in something like this. And so I'm up here not as a religious scholar, not as the chairman of anything, but as somebody who is actually applauding the efforts of these young men who are overcoming these fears and differences to create something very positive. So by contrast to the lazy student that I was, these guys are coming together to build bridges, to promote understanding, and to embrace their respective backgrounds, which is something that we all should be very proud of, as the previous speakers mentioned. So as many of you know, just a very quick little background for those of you who are new to this. UniFaith is a nonprofit group that was formulated by these 5 students who attend Hinsdale Central. They're very passionate about working together to promote mutual understanding and contributing to the public through charity as well. I'm imagining that some of the future projects will revolve around that. All of this is obviously with the goal of promoting peace and tolerance with each other. And really quickly, just in terms of the founding of the organization, I've heard this relate to me, so you guys will correct me if I'm wrong here, but the boys actually were hoping to convey different religious perspectives as part of an article that they were hoping to submit for a student magazine. Somewhere along the line, as these efforts evolved, they actually figured out that in order to share their perspectives with the world, they had to first understand and share their knowledge with each other and better understand each other. And I think that's how the organization got started. Again, through the boys here and through the parents, they've learned a lot along the way. They learned much more than they could ever learn in a comparative religions class in college or in high school. And again, for that, we applaud their efforts. Another thing that we want to recognize is the work that's been done in conjunction with the MLA program. For those of you who are not familiar, the MLA is Muslim Leadership in America. That's part of the Islamic Foundation, which is where we are here today, to bring about this program specifically for Umbrellas for Peace. There were many kids involved from the MLA program at all levels to help plan and promote today's event. And we'll talk a little bit more about the actual activities in a second here in terms of providing instructions. Finally, I just wanted to provide a couple of additional comments. The first point is that cynicism is very easy. You know, even in attending one of the previous planning meetings, it's very easy for parents to say, "Oh, you're trying to create tolerance and create peace and understanding. Good luck with that, guys. You know, have at it." It's very easy. Cynicism is probably the easiest thing that any of us can do as an adult. And one of the great things about these young gentlemen up here is the fact that they've been able to overcome that innate natural tendency towards cynicism. And in addition to that, it's very easy as a student at this age, you can understand that they're focused on their schoolwork, they might have their nose to the grindstone in terms of their studies, but in addition to that, they've all created and put in such a large amount of effort to make this thing happen. You guys actually, some of you guys have AP exams tomorrow, is that right? So, it's not just, they're not just doing this for, it's because it's going to look good on their college application, or because it's something that they think you need to do to impress others. They're doing this out of the goodness of their heart and a genuine desire to make progress. So the boys deserve a lot of credit for that. As far as what can we do about this going forward in terms of tolerance and peace and understanding, it's a very difficult thing. Again, that cynicism feeds into the notion that it's very difficult to measure tolerance. There's no consumer confidence index, there's no unemployment rate, there's no national statistics to indicate tolerance, and that's one thing that's very difficult to gauge. And when you see the events that Brother Omer was talking about that are happening these days, it's very easy to be cynical and say that all of those efforts are a lost cause. But it's important to stand up to that and to believe that that's not the case, and to continue to have optimism for the future. Maybe as part of overcoming these issues and having tolerance is as simple as standing up for each other. So the next time you hear a inappropriate joke in the workplace, or a fellow student is perhaps making fun of a specific religion or a specific belief, maybe you stand up for each other and say, hey, I know a Muslim, I know a Jew, I know a Christian, and that's not representative of their faith. Or maybe it's as simple as a willingness to listen. Maybe it's as simple as saying, like Brother Muzaffar was saying, you hear about these crazy people in the news doing crazy things, that person doesn't represent my point of view. Perhaps it's as simple as being willing to understand each other and to disassociate ourselves from extremist elements in all parts of society. Lastly, just to close out my comments before we acknowledge the gentleman here, I do want to share a quote. It's actually from C. Everett Koop, the former U.S. Surgeon General. He's not a theologian, neither am I. I'm not a religious scholar myself, but I do think it kind of sums up some of the sentiment of the day. Here's the quote. "The American ideal is not that we all agree with each other, or even like each other every minute of the day. In fact, it is that we respect each other's rights, especially the right to be different, and that, at the end of the day, we will understand that we are one people, one country, and one community, and that our well-being is inextricably bound with the well-being of each other and each one of our fellow citizens." So with that, what I want to do is, Brother Omer, if you can grab the certificates over there, what I'd like to do is to acknowledge the students and families that are involved in the UniFaith program, and specifically in the Umbrellas for Peace today. We're very proud of all of them, and I'm going to introduce them all individually, and I'd like you all to give each one of them a very hearty round of applause. So, representing the Muslim faith, Safan Saeed. Representing the Christian faith, Chris Sergalis. Also representing the Christian faith, Mike Bromberg. Representing the Hindu faith, Vishal Patel. And Jake Hall representing the Jewish faith. We also want to acknowledge all the efforts on behalf of the boys' families, without whom none of this would have been possible. So we'd like each of the parents to stand up as we acknowledge them. For Safan Saeed, Syed and Sarah Sadeh, can you guys stand and be acknowledged over there? For Chris Sergalis, Nick and Mary Sergalis, please stand. For Mike Bromberg, Rick and Gail Bromberg, please stand. Okay. For Vishal Patel, Dilip and Krishna Patel. And for Jake Hall, Mark Hall, and Susan Brody, please, if you're still here. Excellent. And one additional acknowledgement, there were other people who helped and put a great deal of effort into the program. So we'd like to thank TJ Rocky. TJ, I saw you there. Please stand. Debbie Hayes. Debbie here. And Arachna, where's Arachna? There she is. Can you stand, please, and be acknowledged? So we'd like to thank all the volunteers on the project, and we appreciate all that's been done. So With that, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do this afternoon. Can you